Spawn the Eternal is an action-adventure fighting game that was released for the PlayStation in North America in 1997 and would later be added in Europe in 1998. That would allow you to play as the popular comic book character throughout many different worlds and environments, where your main goal is literally to explore every level and just defeat every opponent that you face until you get to the very end. Development of the game began in early 1995, but the game's original format was later scrapped almost a year later and would be redesigned to utilise a similar 3D maze style element that was inspired by the popularity of Tomb Raider, which led to the development cycle being prolonged for at least another year. So when the game was announced, it tried to coincide with the film's release in theatres around the same time. But unfortunately, when the game did release, it was met with some of the worst and negative criticism seen in a video game, often being regarded as one of the worst games ever in existence, with poor controls, buggy graphics. A lot of reviewers did not like the really low res textures. They didn't like the whole aura about the game pretty much, and even the fight sequences, because there are certain instances that every interaction that you have with an enemy always results in you having to go into like a side scrolling almost 2D kind of like fight sequence, even though it's in 3D, but it tries to implement elements of games the likes of Virtua Fighter or even Tekken, but it just doesn't even come close because the controls are very, very clunky and the AI is so broken that more often than not, even a simple fight can easily be turned on its head because the opponents just block everything and then they just wipe you out very, very quickly. And even though Spawn is overpowered, where he should be, it takes you ages to defeat enemies, whereas they can knock you down with at least 3 or 4 hits, which is crazy when you think about it. So the game was just panned across the board, and even with the likes of the puzzles, they just found it to be just somewhat awkward and even just repetitive across the entirety of the game, which would result mainly in the game just not selling overly well. But if we look back, right, the game is a buggy mess, there's no denying that, but the fact is that you can play as the character of Spawn is something that many would even try to at least look into, especially if you want to look into the history of the character. This game won't be for everybody, make no mistake about that, but there are a few players out there that will find something in this. While this game did lack in lots of areas, it did have some interesting ideas, let's just say it that way, but they just could have been executed way better than they originally were. But even from my own time playing it, when I look back, I rented it out one weekend, and to be honest, I found the game, at the time weird, and I didn't really understand what was going on, and I did find it a struggle to figure out what to do. There were certain points in the game where I just got completely stuck because I couldn't figure out a certain puzzle, but more to the point, it was really to do with the fight sequences, because I could get so far, and there was always one or two opponents that when you get into a fight sequence, because you can't avoid it, once you're within the vicinity of an enemy, once you get close to them at all, it always goes into a fight sequence. So like it would go originally when you're exploring in the game from a third person behind the shoulder perspective as you're travelling through all of the dark alleyways and rooms, but then once an enemy is in the room or in the area and you're close to him, it always goes into a fight sequence and you can't avoid it. So in order to progress in the game, you have to defeat the enemies. There's no two ways about it. You can't get out of it at all. You can't avoid them, and this also leads to the frustration, and I found that to be the case. I know people criticised the graphics and the music and just the aura about the game, and yes, I at the same time did struggle to get into it at first, but me being me, I often found even the worst games, I often always found a way to enjoy them, believe it or not, to some degree. Yeah, it did frustrate the hell out of me, and even to this day I've still never fully finished the game because I always get stuck at certain parts and it just drives you insane. But I don't know, it's just there was something about it that maybe in its own way did have a unique charm that you genuinely won't get anywhere else. Now it's not to say that everybody will like it, and I totally agree with that to a certain extent, but I don't know, for me it's just I like the quirkiness in games that try to do something a wee bit different, that is different. I know a lot of other people always just want mainstream stuff and everything has to be perfect and all this. I always find the quirky elements and the elements that people don't like, I always find them sometimes to be the more enjoyable aspects of it, as long as they're not frustrating to a degree, which usually they are. But there are some elements that I do enjoy more than normal, and even though the music, right, it isn't great in the game, but it definitely sets a dark and somber tone game, and even with the gritty graphics, I don't know, it does have an interesting atmosphere and a lore to it. I don't know why, I can't put my name on it, but it does have it. If anything, when you think about it, even though it's more of an action focused game, but it does feel like it does have some variation of horror elements to a degree, more so with the atmosphere around it, like when you're travelling through each level. But the repetitiveness of the game quickly dissolves that element to it, especially once you get into the fights. In all honesty, yeah, I agree with the reviews for the most part. It probably is one of the worst of these style of games that's on the PlayStation. Like, it could have been a lot better, and the fact is that it has a very popular comic book character tied to it. The funny thing is, it still didn't make much of a difference. But even if you go back, and I have covered this on other videos, even on one of my other channels that I started up over the last couple of months, Memories of Sega, where I looked at a lot of movie games from the likes of Sega consoles with the Master System, the Mega Drive, the Game Gear, even up to like the Sega Saturn and the Dreamcast. I will leave a link to those videos in the description if you also want to go and check them out. But the thing is, anything that was tied to movies or even popular comic book characters or TV characters, even back then, there was always really an issue with a lot of these games. They were just thrown together and they weren't really polished or executed in the way that they should have been. Now, there are some games that did stand out that were masterpieces in their own right. Like, if you look even on the Mega Drive, like say with Disney's Aladdin and a couple of others, they were excellent games. But there was definitely a lot of more mainstream games, like when you look at Indiana Jones and a couple of others, that were just complete messes that should have been better and just weren't. They were just more frustrating and had really repetitive gameplay mechanics that had no place of being there. And a lot of them were put in as a challenge to try and make the game more approachable. Well, or so they thought. But it ended up just frustrating players more to the point. It's like everything was just thrown together in a quick way to make a quick buck out of it. And you kind of get the feeling with Spawn the Eternal here as well. It has a lot of similar elements in terms of what the ideas were behind it, which is a pity. Because like on paper, when you think about it, the fact is that it took inspiration from Tomb Raider. It should have been better. But just the clunkiness of the controls and just the elements of the fighting is just repetitive. Yes, there are quirks around it that I personally like. I like the atmospheric elements about it. And I think for me, personally, that's its highlight feature. But the gameplay itself is slow, clunky, sluggish. It is a very slow camera. Like, you could create a massive list of all the things that people don't like about the game. But I don't know, I just found it interesting. Let's just put it that way. And the thing is, interesting games are my thing. I do like the quirkiness of them. Even if other people don't like them, I genuinely will give them a go. And there's a very good chance that I probably will find something out of it that I like. Like, it'll never be my favourite game, don't get me wrong, but there's just always something about them that, I don't know, I just find appealing. It's crazy. And I'm sure there are others out there that found that to be the thing as well. But regardless, each to their own, I suppose. Everyone has a different way or different perception of the games that they play. Some will enjoy these games, some will absolutely hate them, and that's totally fine. We're all different at the end of the day. No two people are the same. We all have different and varying opinions on what we like and what we don't like. But if we do like something, we shouldn't let other people's opinions bother us, really. It's how it looks to you at the end of the day. But with that being said, I would love to know your thoughts of Spawn the Eternal for the PlayStation, and what did you think of it overall? Did you agree with all of the reviews that the game got? Did you also find it repetitive and frustrating, or did you even find it appealing in some way, like I did? It will be interesting to hear your thoughts on this, so be sure to share it down in the comments below. And if you would like to see more content around more unusual and quirky games like this that were also released on the PlayStation, then you can check out this playlist here on screen to see more of those games in action. And as always, keep those gaming memories alive.